For many, life in the city is an opportunity to make ends meet, a chance to break from the yoke of hardships in the village. Some are lucky to make it, whilst for others, well, it gets worse than before. Struggling to survive each day in the slums of a little town, Kwesi knew his youthful days were wasting away. A young man whose good looks had been marred by the hardships of life. Each day was a hard struggle as he lived on hand to mouth from the little sales he made from his rickety taxi bequeathed him by his late father. This taxi incurred him much more cost than benefit, as it was utterly problematic. But to avoid the lazy man tag, he had to manage it any way he could. He had no choice. His girlfriend AC he lived with also had nothing worth contributing. Sales from roasted maize she sold was just not enough. They will often sit discussing dreams they knew may never manifest. It was always a desire. Nothing but just that. Fed up with life's hot lashes on his back, Kwesi decided to travel to the main city where there were opportunities. He knew life out there wouldn't be easy, but he believed that it was better than the struggles in the slum. This he discussed with AC. But how will you survive on your own as you have no connections in the city? She asked in concern. He sighed and confessed honestly he had no idea. Just hold on till we have a good plan, she advised. I believe God will make a way soon, she added. He took this advice. Did he have a choice? Walking in wonder one morning, he saw a private car stop by the side of the road. The owner, Mr. Ansa, a well-to-do man, stranded by it. He had no idea what to do as the car was faulty. Feeling his frustration and knowing there were no mechanics in that vicinity, Kwesi walked over to him, requesting to assist if he could. The elated Mr. Ansan readily agreed, hoping for a miracle. Being an experienced mechanic with some home-acquired knowledge from his rickety taxi, it was easy for Kwesi to fix the issue with the toolbox he took from Mr. Ansa. The issue was quickly solved to the astonishment of Mr. Ansa. He had spent close to an hour trying to get out from the situation, and Kwesi had been the answer to his prayer. He thanked Kwesi immensely, as this was going to save him a contract he could have lost to lateness, he explained. He gave him his call card, asking him to call him before evening. Then, off he drove. Back home, AC shared her happy experience of making good sales that day. How much she had made was just stipends. It was a glimmer of hope for future opportunities, Kwesi said. In his heart, this was just nothing to build one's hopes on. His mind was in turmoil, how to survive in the pressing harsh conditions. It was almost a little after sunset, Kwesi remembered his encounter with Mr. Ansa. He knew calling him would be a waste of airtime, as all he would get was the usual thank you. But out of courtesy, he decided to call, and he did. Mr. Ansa's voice sprang up cheerfully, and learning it was Kwesi, was overjoyed. He shared the good news with him, how he had won an amazing contract. It was all thanks to Kwesi, he said, as he had helped him avoid lateness. He requested to meet up with him for a special reward. The elated Kwesi, upon hearing this, got himself ready, explaining to AC what had transpired. She wished him luck, and off he went. In a local bar, Mr. Ansa well received Kwesi. From here, Kwesi learned the importance of the man he sat across from. Mr. Ansa was a big-time contractor who had other businesses on the side. He had come to Kwesi's township to secure a bid to build an ultra-modern hospital and had won. With less time remaining to leave for the city, he brought out an envelope containing cash to offer Kwesi as a token for his earlier service. Though tempted, Kwesi remembered the adage that when you gave man a fish, it was a meal for a moment, but teaching him to fish was for a lifetime. I appreciate the money, sir, But I'm afraid I can't take it, Kwesi said to the bewildered Mr. Ansah, who by now knew the hardships the young man endured. I implore you to help me get a career in the city, as there is nothing here for me, he added. No matter how little, I can manage what I will earn, he further added. He knew he was asking way too much for the simple help he had offered this man, but his ambitions were on a drive and he couldn't stop expressing it. The man, Mr. Ansah, was patiently listening to him, so why not? He took the opportunity to further elaborate on his work potential as though it was an interview. Mr. Ansah saw the depth of his wisdom and admired his desire to pursue a career. You have said very good things, young man, Mr. Ansah told him. He shared with him how many young men had always asked for monetary favors when it came to asking. He found Kwesi's request and commitment impressive and promised to assist him the best way he could. He told him to expect his call over the weekend for a positive discussion. He still gave the cash to Kwame for upkeep. The excited young man walked away, thinking about a promising future. Back home, Kwesi shared the exciting news with Essie, who was overjoyed. This was the doing of the Lord, she said. It was difficult for Kwesi to sleep that night as he thought about opportunities life had in stock for him. The arrival of weekend felt to him like a lifetime, but he knew it would definitely come, and he was prepared for it. The weekend came and Kwesi held on to his phone like dear life. His anxiety was overwhelming. It took Essie every effort to have him eat and concentrate on other things. It had been long Kwesi visited church, but he went that Sunday, praying for God to touch the heart and mind of Mr. Ansah. Sunday evening, nothing heard of. The young man was burning inside. A call from a wrong number frustrated him that he nearly smashed his phone. Essie had to keep calming him down. He wanted to call as he had his call card, but Essie advised him to hold on as he, Mr. Ansah himself, had promised to be the one calling. He waited for the call. It never came. The next day, Kwesi, after a trip or two with his taxi, went to his favorite joint to eat. There, a call came from an unknown number, and recognizing the voice, was elated it was Mr. Ansah. He apologized for his inability to call over the weekend, as duty called on him. He told him about a new company he was yet to establish, where he would like Kwesi to be the head or chief driver when commenced. This was the best news ever he had heard in his lifetime. Not only was he going to be a driver at the company, but the chief driver, with 12 drivers under his supervision. To be briefed more on the job, Kwesi was to visit the city within that week and to help check the conditions of the car the company would be using for its operations. He would stay for a week, after which he would return to his town till the business properly commenced in the month. He was to expect cash the next day for his transportation and a few logistics. Kwesi's joy knew no bounds. Mr. Ansah was God sent. His guardian angel, he thought. He just couldn't hide his excitement. Good life stared at him. The night before his travel, Kwesi barely slept. It was like a kid experiencing Christmas. Essie stayed up packing the best costumes for his departure. They discussed how the future looked for them. It looked bright and very promising. He would work hard and make life comfortable for them, he promised. At the break of dawn, Kwesi got his luggage, then getting into a taxi, got off to the station. He was lucky to meet a bus almost full. Getting inside, his dream journey began. He thought about his hard life in this town, promising to make good for himself. His positive impact would make life better for himself and Essie and the community at large. He was filled with lots of hopes. A few winks, once a while, and in 4 hours and some minutes, they arrived in the capital. Finally, he had arrived. The last time he had been here was about 6 years ago when he had come for an uncle's funeral. Later had been the hustle in the small town. He placed the call to a number he'd been given by Mr. Ansah to call upon arrival. Not long after, a man showed up, introduced himself as Mr. Ansah's driver, and helped him pack his luggage into a private car. Kwesi wondered why this man wasn't driving Mr. Ansah the day he visited his town. Well, it was all for the best, he thought. Nature had an interesting way of rewarding, didn't it? It was a silent ride, but it was okay for Kwesi. He took in all the beauty that abounded, enjoying the capital's view. Not long after, the driver drove into a large compound with a magnificent apartment. Kwesi stared at it, wondering how much a room in this expensive hotel may cost for a day. Mr. Ansah might have paid a lot for a room here, he thought. Well, he was a rich man. As if sensing his wonder, the driver smiled and told him it was the apartment Mr. Ansah lived in. His house? A bewildered Kwesi exclaimed. The driver told him it was one of 3 other houses Mr. Ansah owned. Kwesi knew he had underestimated Mr. Ansah's wealth. The driver called out a maid, Kukwa, to come out, introducing Kwesi as an expected guest. She was expecting him, she said, as Mr. Ansah had mentioned to her earlier. This made Kwesi feel like a VIP already. Getting into the parlor, Kwesi was amazed at the grandeur state. Wow, this house was like a paradise, he thought. Everything was mesmerizing. Offered a drink, he was asked to feel comfortable as Mr. Ansah would join him soon. There was a way Kukwa looked at him, almost flirtatiously, but he was too concentrated about the excitement that he barely noticed. Concentrated on the sweet drink he'd never tasted before, he was alerted to the sweetest fragrance he had ever smelled before. He lifted his head and almost choked on his drink when he was met by an unexpected sight. Mine, oh mine. A lady whose beauty was indescribable was walking through as she spoke on the phone excitedly. She was Jasmine, the daughter of Mr. Ansah. This was beauty in flesh and blood. Beauty personified. Her personality was alluring. A face radiant, breasts firm and outstanding. A flawless skin. An all-nubile package for a single lady. She walked past Kwesi without care or acknowledgement as she was so excited speaking on the phone. Kwesi had never desired a woman for her looks or anything, aside from his girlfriend Essie, but the tension bulging in his trousers made him question his fidelity. He could admire, but to desire? No. The load in his trousers was quite disturbing from a common thing as just a glance at Jasmine. Well, it was natural to feel such natural tension as a man sometimes. I mean, who wouldn't be aroused upon such sights? But of course, there was no way anything under the sun would distract him when it came to his desire of chasing this success dream. He was here for a purpose, not to stare at a distraction. Seconds later, Mr. Ansah walked in smiling. This was unexpected for Kwesi, as he still had the bulge of his little man in his trousers. It took a strategy to adjust and be comfortable. They shook hands and he sat, chit-chatting about how the journey had been for Kwesi. Since it was already late and the journey might have been stressful, Mr. Ansah suggested Kwesi rested to replenish. But before, it was just prudent he be introduced to other members of the household. Mr. Ansah called forth Kukwa and asked her to call forth his wife and daughter, Jasmine, so he introduced them to Kwesi, as he was to stay the week in the house whilst checking out the job. Kukwa left and came back later to say Mrs. Ansah would join them soon, but for Jasmine, she wasn't in her room. Minutes later, Mrs. Ansah, the wife of Mr. Ansah, came in. A look at her and you could feel an air of strictness about her. This was not a woman you could mess with, Kwesi knew. She sat and Mr. Ansah introduced Kwesi to her. It was obvious he had stated his intentions to her already, so nothing much about his stay was said, Mrs. Sansa only advised, no. It came more as a warning for him to be well behaved both here in the house and at the workplace. He had to take every instructions here seriously. That was all that would warrant his happy stay. This was not going to be difficult for him, he knew. He was a man of peace who kept himself out of trouble as much as possible. He would make sure he won favor in the eyes of every member of this household. He thanked them immensely, promising to show the best of himself at all times. Kukwa was called back to lead Kwame to his room in the boys' quarters. Thanking them one more time, he left with Kukwa. Outside the compound leading to the boys' quarters, Kwesi saw sections of the house he had not yet seen. Wow, this house was way bigger than he imagined. He thought of it as a palace. Seeing his curiosity, Kukwa smiled and asked him to settle so she could take him on a tour around the house. This was agreeable to him, and he thanked her. Walking further, they got to a poolside with a beautiful edifice. There, Kwesi saw the dazzling lady he had much earlier seen, enjoying a moment at the poolside. He averted his eyes when she casually turned her face to meet his. That is Jasmine, Mr. Ansa's daughter, Kukwa said. Be sure never to annoy her. She is worse than her stepmother, she added. Yeah, right? He was never going to cross the line with her. He wouldn't even look at her again. Nah lie, he cast one more glance before they curved. Soon, they arrived at the boys' quarters, where Kwesi was utterly shocked would be his abode for the next few days. This was way too much for him. It was a luxury he knew he could never on his own afford. Wow, just wow was all he could say. Kukwa gave him her number and asked him to call her when he was done settling in.